Right now, let's take you to the Combine and talk with Dallas Cowboys reporter for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. It is Nick Harris. Good afternoon, sir.
Hey, good afternoon, fellas. How are y'all?
Man, I'm doing okay. My co-hosts might be spiraling out.
It's allergies.
Not sure. Let me ask you this, if you think it's allergies. He came in, put a hat on, has bloodshot eyes, and wanted to make a joke about Dick Billings. Do you think he's cool, or, you know?
Is he celebrating 2 months out from 420, or what are we doing?
Oh, now that.
No, I just got some allergies today, Nick, I promise.
I'll tell you what, I had the worst allergies potentially of my life this time last week when I was back in Dallas. So they're really bad right now. So
then you needed to get a Baja Blast and some Doritos. I get what you're saying.
100%.
Now, since you mentioned 420, that's how many millions of dollars Brandon Aubrey wants. $420 million, right?
Yeah, that's an interesting situation. While the Cowboys have offered him a deal that would make him the richest kicker in the NFL, it's not at what some reports have been suggesting as far as it being at $7.5 million. I wouldn't say that that's accurate.
What do you think is accurate then?
It's probably closer to 7 to 6.5. Right now, the market is at 6.4 with Harrison Butker. So anything obviously above that mark per year would qualify as the richest in the league. But the Cowboys have so many advantages built into this negotiation that they could come with, hey, give me $6.5 million right there, and they'll be like, yeah, we're going to see what this market looks like because we can retain you at any point. They can put the second round tender since he's a restricted free agent, put that on him, and if any team makes an offer, they can either take a second-round pick from that team or match that offer. Or if no team makes an offer, which does not really happen in restricted free agency, especially for a kicker, same exact thing happened with Justin Tucker, then they can just sign him to a cheaper deal at the end of the day. And so they have so many built-in advantages here to where, like, if they come and they're like, hey, we want $10 million per year, it's like, okay, cool, and I want, Beyonce. Yeah. So it's a little different.
I like that. And then for future seasons, we need that as a drop.
Yes.
For future seasons, they could theoretically just franchise tag him, and that number's already going to be lower. So I appreciate the negotiating standpoint, but it feels like they're going to lose this one.
I think he ends up being the highest paid kicker in the league.
Sure.
I don't think he gets, let's say, 7.5. I don't think he gets that.
Now, what are you on the lookout for, or what have you already been on the lookout for today specifically at the Combine?
Yeah, today we have been able to speak to a lot of the linebackers and defensive linemen that are here at the Combine, and tracking down which of those guys that the Cowboys have met with for a formal meeting. They get 45 formal meetings out here in Indianapolis where they can sit down with these guys for about 18 to 20 minutes, and they can put them on the whiteboard, bring up some film, and just barrage them with questions over the course of that 18 to 20 minutes. And we've already been able to track down 30 of the 45. So that goes to tell you how many resources that they are putting into the front seven and the looks that they're taking at those guys. It's going to be pretty fascinating to see which offensive guys they do end up bringing in for formals. There is one big one that I'm going to hold for a minute, but there is one big offensive guy that they are bringing in that I think is fascinating, but I'd be shocked if there's more than 5 or 6 that they end up using out of those 45 on the offensive side.
So one of the defensive people I wanted to know about is, what are your thoughts and breakdown thus far of Cassius Howell?
Yeah, Cassius Howell, I think that's a fascinating potential scenario at the number 20 spot. A guy who in this scheme that Christian Parker is going to be running, 3-4 at the 4-3 spacing, and Stephen Jones made sure to clarify that it's going to be multiple. It's not going to be as cut and dry as that. I get it. But if we're looking at Vic Fangio's, previous iterations of his defense, and even with Vance Joseph, these guys that even Mike Elko going all the way back to Christian Parker's time at Texas A&M, all these guys that Parker has been under has been pretty much similar iteration of having that defensive end who's a stand-up rusher who can get around as a quote-unquote outside linebacker, but can also drop back in coverage a little bit and make life difficult across the middle of the field. Cassius Howell really fits that. And coming from the Mike Elko scheme at Texas A&M, it would be a healthy transition for him. Yeah, Cassius Howell, that's a guy that the Cowboys have formally met with here at the Combine already. Met with him last night, and curious to see what that looks like moving forward.
I'm kind of curious on this because I've seen this list is pretty extensive already, as you just said, and that's exciting because, as I was telling Kevin earlier, Nick, and I can't say that the Joneses have changed by any means, but it does feel like Schottenheimer was like, I'm not going to do it the way McCarthy did. I'm going to make sure that we're aggressive and letting the Joneses know what we want. And it looks like all this work that they're doing on this front end is very important to them. When you're looking at some of these guys, you're like, oh, I had this guy as a second rounder, and the Cowboys don't have a second rounder, and so that's interesting that they're looking at that guy.
Yeah, for sure, and that's the potential of moving back from 12 or moving back from 20 and picking up some day 2 capital, which I think is a very realistic scenario. Jerry has mentioned it, Steven has mentioned it, that they have those picks to be able to use for that potential layout, and I think there's going to be some teams who want to come up to at least to that 20 spot. I'm not 100% sure about the 12 spot just yet. I will say this. The Cowboys fans need to be rooting for Ty Simpson and these 3 receivers to have an awesome week. These 3 receivers, Mekhi Lemon, Carnell Tate, and Jordan Tyson, they need to be rooting for these guys to have an awesome week here in Indianapolis so that they stamp a top 12 type of stock, and teams are willing to either move up to 12A or B, a lot of these premier defenders slip down and they end up with a Reuben Bain or a Caleb Downs or an Arvell Reese or something like that. But yeah, 12 is a intriguing spot here in this draft, and Cowboys have found them spot in this position back-to-back years now.
When you look at the guys that they have talked to about that defensive end outside linebacker kind of position, or did they all fit it? All the guys that you've seen them talk to so far?
Yeah, most of them, yes. Hold on, let me bring up this list right here in front of me that I have. We have. Let's see, Reuben Bain, Cassius Howell, David Bailey. I would say Howell and Bailey for sure. I think Bain is so versatile that he can pretty much play anywhere you want him. Auburn defensive end Kieran Crawford, I would say he fits that role. Tennessee defensive end Josh Josephs, who actually said that they worked him through on the whiteboard being that guy that's a stand-up rusher and moving back in coverage a little bit. So they're even working through how these guys would fit in the scheme. Denied Dennis Sutton, more of a big guy. I think he would be hand in the dirt and probably slide inside. Missouri defensive end Zion Young and UCF defensive end Malachi Lawrence. I think those are both guys, too, that fit that role, and Akeem Mesidor as well. They also met with Clemson defensive end TJ Parker. I think he's more of a guy that puts his hand in the dirt, but most of these guys fit that stand-up rusher type role who can maximize their athleticism.
If you had to guess right now, what pick will it be when the Cowboys draft Jacob Rodriguez? Since we're trading back to pick up extra picks, when's that part going to happen?
Yeah, that would be a fascinating one, right? And I'll play along. 28, why not?
Oh, okay.
He said I'll play along. Does that mean you don't agree with Wolchuk on his love for this player?
I like Jacob Rodriguez. I don't know if he's a first-round pick. I like Jacob Rodriguez, though. I just think there's so many really good defenders in this draft, and there's also so many really good linebackers that, like Jacob Rodriguez, any other year will probably be a stamped first-rounder. I expect him to be kind of in that Carson Schwessinger conversation from last year, where you're going into Friday on day 2 and you see that name among the group at the top of the board, and he goes pretty early in round 2.
I was having this thought while I was laying in bed last night, Kevin, and I was just thinking about things because that's what I do.
Listening to some groovy albums and stuff.
Okay, stop. And I was wondering, Nick, if let's say we don't get that run that we'd love to have with Ty Simpson moving up and those receivers, but then all of a sudden you're sitting there with some good offensive tackles sitting there at 12. Would that be a nightmare scenario for this team, or would they consider that?
One of the things I was tracking, that I am tracking still throughout the week here, is do they have anything left to do on the offensive side of the ball? And the reason I asked that question is for Terrence Steele and Tyler Guyton.
Yes.
Seems like the confidence is high in both of those guys, and not only in those two guys, but in the rest of the offense, and that they're probably not going to address those 2 spots with a premium draft selection. And so, if that's the case, I mean, Francis Mauangoa, that would be a tough one to pass up if you're asking me. The Miami right tackle.
Yes.
I think he's going to play in this league for a long time. But I don't. I say this. I don't think they draft an offensive lineman in the first round, but I know that is probably the likeliest wrong statement I could make about the Dallas Cowboys.
What is your confidence level then? I have to admit, you probably heard the surprise in my voice when you mentioned Terrence Steele, just because of me personally, the combination of mediocre play and how much money you could save from moving off of him. I am surprised at that level of confidence the team might have in Steele.
Yeah, it's the run blocking stuff, and they saw an elevation under Clayton Adams last year for him getting out into space and being able to really pave some running lanes, that they want that consistency. Now, the pass pro, it definitely needs to take a step forward, and it might just be a situation where, this is more me theorizing, it could be a situation where they understand what they're going to get from him in pass protection. It'd be like, we can live with that if the run blocking is at the level that it is, but I wonder what the future does look like for Terrence Steele, and does a contract maybe get restructured this offseason with him? I think there's still a conversation to be had about Terrence Steele this offseason. It just doesn't seem that him being cut is going to be one of those conversations.
Now, while you're talking about players that are on the team or were on the team and how they fit, how do you think Javon Clowney could or does potentially fit in Christian Parker's scheme?
It's fascinating, and shout out to John Machota of The Athletic, because he kind of looked at the juxtaposition of two quotes that Stephen Jones has had regarding Jadeveon Clowney. And in December on you guys' airwaves, he was mentioning, absolutely, we're going to talk to Jadeveon Clowney. He's going to be one of the first guys we talk to get him back in free agency. We want him back. He's been awesome. And then yesterday he was asked, hey, have you guys talked to Jadeveon Clowney yet? And he's like, no. That it just kind of left it at that. I was like, okay, and what has happened since then? A change in defensive coordinator, a change in defensive system. And, the more I look at it and what probably Christian Parker is going to be advocating for as far as retooling that front seven, it's going to be young talent. And it could also just be a situation where Jadeveon Clowney, maybe they have briefly, chopped it up with him, and Jadeveon Clowney hasn't been at a training camp for the last few years. He's like, yeah, hit me up in August if I'm still around, But I think that I do know that they want to get younger on the defensive line, and Jadeveon Clowney doesn't necessarily play into that.
I'm just kind of curious how your day goes, because Broadus was kind of explaining, he was like, I can do this, and then I can meet those guys at the tunnel and talk to the guys a little bit. How do you go about this? Do you go watch a lot of the activity on the field? Do you have that access, or is it more about, for you, kind of the connections and conversations?
Yeah, I would love to be able to sit at Lucas Oil and really take that in. And my first combine that I came out here, I got to witness Xavier Worthy run that 4.21, and I just thought that was one of the coolest things that I've been able to witness on the job, period. But I have learned now, this is year 3 of combine, that every second that I spend in Lucas Oil Stadium is a second that I'm burning, potentially building relationships anywhere else in Indianapolis. Mm-hmm. And so, there's a couple of places that I hang out at and try to either agent hunt or source hunt, and that's been what my week has looked like. And I told Bobby Belt before he came out here, I said, if I'm averaging more than 3 hours of sleep per night, I'm doing it wrong. And
nice.
right now I'm averaging about 5, so I'm doing it really wrong right now.
Oh,
it's okay.
No.
It's okay. It's all right. You still got time, so it's time to reduce that time.
But not
I will
time
say
to
this.
sleep.
I'll say this. Keep an eye on the defensive tackles over the course of the next few weeks. They have the $64 million tied into Kenny Clark, Osa Digizua, and Quinnen Williams. And Steven had iterated on Monday that they certainly understand that they can't pay all 3 of those guys that amount in 2026. So I would look for some movement there, more so in the sense of figuring out those contracts and figuring out those cap numbers to make them more palatable for 2026. I think that is a task on the agenda this week.
Oh, okay. Well, obviously you can throw out whatever you want here, but I was curious, in the Nick Harris hierarchy of things to do, would it go cut Kenny Clark's salary essentially in half, then restructure Osa or extend Quinnen? Like, what would be your maybe order on that?
Yeah, it's really tough to move Osa's contract right now. There are some things they can do to free up some space from Osa's deal, but since it was signed a year ago,
right,
next week, there's still a lot of bones in place that are tough to move around. But you can extend Kenny Clark and Quinnen Williams push their money down the line a little bit and make it work here in 2026 toward those cap numbers. They want to keep all three of those guys. And you know, I've briefly mentioned it with some people out here about the defensive tackle situations, like, oh my God, are they going to trade one or cut one? I was like, I don't think so. I don't think they're going to do all of that. But they're going to figure out a way where they can keep all three long term, and it makes sense for each year's cap number, if that makes sense.
Would that leave Peter Woods off the Cowboys list then?
You would think so, but they have formally met with a pretty good group of defensive tackles, and Peter Woods was one of them. Caleb Banks was another. Xavier Harris at Ole Miss. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We were able to track down 6 defensive tackles that they formally met with. So, you know, they're turning over every stone if it's a defensive player.
I do wonder sometimes too, and this was under the Bill Parcells 3-4. They were like, we got to get bigger inside and outside. I wonder sometimes if they look at some of those tackles and they're like, we can move them out. I wonder if an Osa would slide over in one of those situations or scenarios too.
Yeah, you also look at Peter Woods, and he's played 0 tech all the way out to 5 tech during his career at Clemson, and he said today that he feels like his best tape is at 4-eye, and so you know, there's some versatility there that I think you could even use with a guy that they bring in too.
Now,
I actually have another one, Kevin.
Okay.
I wanted to hop in on real quick. This is, I feel like that Jeremiah Love is a fantastic talent. And I know we haven't gotten to him yet, but do you feel like the running back situation for the Cowboys is square?
I would like to see competition for that complimentary role in training camp. I would like to see a legit competition there. Get Malik Davis back in there. You know, Jaden Blue, hope that he has a year or two where he's able to take a step forward behind the scenes. And then either throw in a young back that you take a swing on, or throw in a veteran that has had proven production at other places, but maybe later in his career, a Miles Sanders type, if you will, and see what that competition ends up looking like in Oxnard. Obviously, Javonte Williams is a cemented RB1, but you do need a guy that you can trust on to be the bell cow in case Williams has to miss a game or two. And if you don't have that threat of the running game, it's going to change the offense completely. And so I would like to see competition at that RB2 spot, no doubt.
So in a crazy scenario where Jeremiah Love is still available at pick 12, is this a CeeDee Lamb scenario where you're like, man, that person is too damn good to pass up?
For me personally, that's a situation where you're calling all these running back teams who are picking 5-6 spots behind you and being like, hey, we got your guy and we're going to tax you for it. And so that would be what I would try to do, and if the phones aren't working, begrudgingly, yes, because he's such a damn good player.
So I want you, Nick, to be so proud of how many questions we've asked without bringing up George Pickens. Now, with that all being said, let's talk about George Pickens. And I don't know if you have insight into this or not, but if you do, I would love to hear it. For me, the thing about giving George Pickens a long-term deal has always been you can move those numbers around as opposed to the franchise tag being set in stone. You can't fiddle with that money whatsoever. Have you ever gotten a sense from the Cowboys that they care about that in terms of we can move this money versus franchise tag can't be messed with?
Yeah, shout out to Todd Archer of ESPN. He asked Stephen Jones explicitly that question you have there, and he was like, so you're comfortable with, if he is playing on the franchise tag, you're comfortable with that $28 million counting toward your cap in 26? And he said, yeah, we're comfortable. We'll be able to make the moves that we need to make to do so. And so, you know, whether that's Stephen talk or if it's actual, you know, feelings behind the scenes, you know, who knows? But you look, if you're asking me Nick Harris's opinion, I can understand why they would want to play him on the tag for a year and see out that possibility.
Tell me more about that, why that is.
They had the 1-year rental last year, and it was phenomenal. Don't get me wrong. But he did miss meetings. He did miss a curfew, and I'd say this as factual, not to bring up anything messy. And having another 1 year where you're hoping a maturity would take a step forward, so you know what you are paying him. Because let's say you pay him $32 million over the course of $32 million per year over the course of 4 years. Let's say they get a deal done next week, and that's what it is, right? And then 2 years from now, you look up and some of these issues quite haven't gotten better, and the production's starting to slip. Maybe Ryan Flanoy's taking a step forward, and then you're locked into that contract. Whereas if you franchise tagged him for another year, you get to see that through a little bit. and either the price point would come down, or you're only paying about $3-4 million per year difference. Now, I understand that's a lot of money you put in toward depth holes and things like that, but if you're asking me, I understand if they end up going that direction, just because they've only had him in the building for 1 year, and it was a fantastic 1 year, don't get me wrong, and they have a high tolerance for the things that he did miss, and it's not like he's a bad person. He's a great dude and a great teammate, and they certainly lean on that, but you'd be foolish to think that those kinds of things will not be brought up in a negotiation, and especially in one like this one. So I'm very curious to see how this conversation goes with his representation this week. It's going to be a huge determining factor in how things play out over the course of the next few weeks and months. But as far as getting an extension done before July 15th, which would be the deadline if they when they end up franchise tagging him, that's going to be an interesting one. That's going to be an interesting one.
And Nick, I do want to bring up when it comes to missed meetings, because that usually seems to be the first thing a lot of people bring up when it comes to this. Jerry did tell you in San Francisco while you were holding a pink drink that that he didn't have a problem with. You think that's more of a coaching and players optics thing than anything else?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, probably so. And again, it's going to be brought up in the negotiation because, think back to when Jerry was reminiscing on those Des Bryant negotiations from years back, and he was like, I talked to Jay-Z, and Jay-Z said he would be at all the meetings, and when Des Bryant missed meetings, where was Jay-Z to be found? And so I know it's getting brought up. It is Jerry's negotiation point here. It's the biggest one he has. And so, yeah, absolutely it's going to be brought up, and I wonder how it ends up manifesting.
Did you make sure to bring up Jay-Z because you had already mentioned Beyonce in this interview?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I show respect to both sides.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's what we appreciate. It's the level of respect that we get and all of the information. Nick, thank you very much. Please make sure that our guys stay out of too much trouble.
Yeah, I appreciate you, fellas, and Corey, get some Kleenex.
Yes, I appreciate. I actually one of our guys brought me a Zyrtec, so I'm okay. Thank you very much, man.
Y'all have a good one.
There you go, Nick Harris from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, knower of all things Dallas Cowboys.